Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting that subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button and your membership options will be presented to you. Today I'm just kind of freewheeling it like I always do on Saturdays. I want to talk about the various comments, but I also have some sort of, some sort of thing to say, my soapbox, I guess. And today I want to talk about the theist argument that I dislike, annoys me the most, okay, that I just, every time I hear it, it just, it's kind of like, what is the one that to me is the worst? And it's the worst on not just an intellectual level, but also a personal level. And it's come up several times in the comments. I'll be addressing the comments later, some of the comments later, but it's the moral argument, okay? It's the moral argument for the existence of God and all the other things that attach around that. Because the moral argument for the existence of God is the argument that annoys me the most. It is the argument that I dislike the most. And it's because there's a smug, shall I say, almost egotistical, there's a hubris behind that argument, okay? That somehow if you don't believe in God, you're not going to be moral. And that's really, to me, the emotional foundation of that argument. I've seen several people react to various, moral arguments this last week on various atheist channels. And I'll probably, deal with some of those reactions on Reaction Mondays, which is what it's become. And my main issue with these theist arguments usually is, they're intellectually unsound or whatever. But the moral argument is more than that. There's a smug thing with theists that if I believe in a God, then therefore I somehow more moral. And they'll deny, well, no, I'm just making this argument, this case for the existence of God based on objective morality. And I said, yes, but the idea that, you need God or some judge watching you in order to be moral, I don't think is very moral, okay? Now, there's a lot of reasons why I dislike this argument, but the argument itself, for instance, I dislike because it assumes a lot. Okay, the two big assumptions, of course, are objective morality exists, which I don't think has been demonstrably proven yet. I mean, people go, well, what about the objective moral that you shouldn't kill people? Well, is that really an objective moral? Because the immediate thing I will sit there and talk about, well, is some killing actually wrong? If somebody tries to, if a woman's about to be raped, and she pulls out a gun and kills her attacker, is that justified homicide? I would say yes. Okay, if somebody else is about to be killed, is that justified homicide? Yes. How about war? We even within the theist camp, and thou shalt not kill or killing another human being, we have all this nuance and subjectivity. Well, it depends on what the killing is done for, and it depends on who's being killed, and it's like, all of a sudden, it becomes a very subjective discussion. And so even thou shalt not kill is not really that objective when you look at even the Bible, when it talks about it. So it's like, I'm not trying to, that part of it hasn't been proven. So you have a big question mark by that premise. And every time we say we have this connection between God and the subjective moral, which we haven't proven exists, we end up with this, okay, well, what kind of God then connects to objective morality? Because your first premise is, if objective morality does not exist, God does not exist. Or you can say it, if God exists, objective morality exists. Objective morality exists, so therefore God exists. Either way. Okay, well, but you haven't made the connection of why objective morality requires a deity. And I've seen several atheist YouTubers that have done this, Apologia, I've done it myself, a few others, where I say, no, you can have subjective moral desires like, Just taking the old, Vulcan Spock one, live long and prosper. Well, that's a subjective statement. What does it mean to live long? And particularly, what does it mean to prosper? Prosperity means different things to different people. But out of that, you can still create objective morals like, want to live a long time, let's not kill anybody unless there's a really good reason. We want to live a long time, let's work towards, things, that don't allow people to be, killed for whatever reasons. Let's find safety things that people are required to do so they don't endanger people's lives unnecessarily, so on and so forth. Prosperity, what does that mean to people? Well, giving people liberty and freedom. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's a subjective thing too. And the more you look into morality, how subjective it is, it's almost like subjectivity and morality. And this is the way I'm leaning right now is it possible to have objective morals given the nature of morality? And that's, just the way society works. And I'm still asking, but what annoys me with this theist argument is the assumption that behind it all, that without God, there is no morals. And because I believe in God, then I have a superior leg up on those that don't when it comes to morality. And then questioning, the morals of the, atheist that eventually follows. Well, how you can't be moral. Everything's relative. Everything's subjective. And I'm like, yeah, it's subjective for you too. I mean, I'm sorry. I've looked at through the centuries how the Bible has been interpreted when it comes to his morality. And yeah, it's been subject to subjectivity hell. I think God is even subjective about his morality because, let's be honest, David gets away with several commandments that he should have been killed for by the people according to God's law, but God lets him get away with it. He punishes him a little bit, but, some other people are dead because of his actions. But you know what? That's okay because he's a man after God's own heart. And God gets really subjective in the story too. And so when you sit there and tell me, as an atheist, I can't have any basis for morality, it gets annoying. And there's a lot of other reasons it gets ignoring, okay? Number one, there are tons of moral systems that have nothing to do with God. I mean, if you look up philosophy and moral philosophy, okay, moral philosophy is its own study in philosophical systems. And there are tons of lists. I mean, there's probably got at least be 100 of different moral systems, okay, that exist that don't have anything to do with God. Evolutionary morality, where people look at the origins of morality from an evolutionary standpoint and show how it is a trait of any species that is social and relies on social action to survive. They have morals. Okay, there's moral rules within those societies, regardless of what species it is, and humans have that in spades. Okay, we have a lot of it because our survival is so interdependent with each other. Moral systems are inevitable, and it has nothing to do with God. Okay, and it annoys me because I hear it all the time. It's when your true test of your morality is when nobody's watching. But then the theist comes up with a system where somebody's always watching. Okay, I live a moral life because it's good for myself and the people around me. Okay, and it actually leads to my long-term survival, my long-term prosperity is working with other people. As an autistic person and somebody who's introverted, I have some problems there. And it's probably why I'm not as successful as I should be because social stuff is difficult for me. But the idea that we don't know where morality comes from, and the idea that we don't have a moral system simply because we don't believe in a cosmic big brother that is constantly watching us, because we, as Christopher Hitchens says, we don't live in a celestial North Korea. Okay, somehow that means that we're not going to be more moral than anybody else. That just is annoying. Okay, and it's untrue. I mean, I am sorry. There are tons of things you can read about morality without God. You can see that it's not all that bad. And what annoys me about Christians who continue to make this argument, or Islamic people, or theists in general who continue to make this argument, it's like you point out to them, go read the other side. Okay, because there's other people. Here, I'll give you one. I got one for you. One I'm reading right now. Moral Origins by Christopher Mohn. Okay, The Evolution of Virtue, Altruism, and Shame. He talks about where those ideas come from an evolutionary point of view, no God required. I'm in the process of reading this book, and it's very enlightening, and I'm trying to find my way through this objective subjective thing, and I'm leading heavy subjective because when I look at practically what we do when it comes to morals, it gets really subjective. Like we're constantly, and that has a benefit of being adaptable to change. Whereas an objective morality doesn't always adapt to change really well. Case in point, the biblical view on slavery, or the biblical view on women being inferior to men, or the biblical view, because that's in there. You can deny it all you want, but I know the Bible too well. Sorry. Various biblical ideas like if this group doesn't believe in my God, I can go kill them. Okay, on and on the list goes, where you have to hate your mother, father, and all those other people according to Jesus, okay? More than, you have to devote yourself to an individual. An abject, might makes right morality is all through the pages of the Bible. Love is demonstrated through obedience to Jesus. That is a might makes right morality. That's a, whatever you want to call it. And to sit there and say that my moral system is bad because I don't believe in God, but somehow your moral system is good because you do believe in God, is kind of like, no, I don't think so. It might be flipped a little bit. Okay, I think mine's better in a lot of ways. I don't have reasons to hate LGBTQ people. I don't have reasons to hate different people from different religions. I don't have that anymore. Okay, and so from my perspective, I can respect a lot more human beings simply because of their humanity. And I don't have to deal with that. And it gets just stupid annoying when people continue to bring this up. They point to the moral argument. They point to the supposed consequences of atheist morality. And it's like, no. And this leads into one of my early comments. And I want to deal with this comment because I think the commenter makes a valid point. Jenna, about 6 days ago when I did my last video on Saturday, she goes, she says, I would add the whole atheist lives in a meaningless thing as a function of their image as atheists, as hedonistic, living for ourselves alone and in the moment. And that is so true. The real problem with a lot of you theist conceptions of atheist morality is that we all follow our atheism leads to a certain moral code, and that is because of your ignorance of all the other different ways that we can live morally. I am a Stoic, okay? I live a moral philosophy that's very much based on Stoicism right now. And why? Because it works, okay? And Stoicism predates Christianity, okay? It does. Okay, so I can already point to philosophical systems of the ancient Greeks that had moral systems that didn't have God in them or didn't necessitate the existence of a God, okay? It just doesn't. When I learned Stoicism, the guy who wrote the book, How to Be a Stoic, he is an atheist, okay? And, it's like, you don't need it, okay? You don't need it. And it goes back to a lot of the arguments against the existence of God. One of my favorites is Occam's razor, getting rid of unnecessary elements. You can live a good moral life and you don't need any deity system to make it so. You don't need a big brother watching you. In fact, if you're a good moral person and you don't believe anybody's watching you, you're actually better in your morality because you're doing it for your own sake and for the sake of the people around you. And that demonstrates to me a morality based on love of your fellow humans rather than fear of an omnipotent God that doesn't exist, okay? We create the boogeyman in order to scare other people into better behavior. And to me, my moral system isn't based on fear. It's based on a genuine care and concern for my fellow human beings and for myself. And that to me is far better. I guess I'll end that little discussion right there because I think it's ended. And let's deal with some of the comments. One of the comments that I got this week that has suspiciously disappeared that I want to deal with right away. Somebody, the problem with this guy is that whenever you post evidence, he's talking about me, okay? Whenever you post evidence about proof of Christian, he just deletes it and, he just doesn't address your comments and so on and so forth. Well, I went back to find that comment to address it and I can't seem to find it. And it's like the guy got deleted, okay, or something. I'm looking for it and I want to deal with this because a lot of people, I've been accused of this a couple of times, that where they accuse me of, oh, you're not addressing the comments, you're not looking at the evidence or whatever that I presented. I got that on, near-death experiences. I got that on other things. And I'm like, I have looked at that stuff, okay, in the past when I was debating these questions for myself. I want to make it very abundantly clear. I do not delete comments unless they're personal attacks or a commenter gets a reputation for being a troll. Okay, he's just trolling people. I am not interested. It's one thing to troll with a little bit of fun attached to it. It's quite another to be a jerk about it. Okay, and it's quite another to be personally insulting. People who come on here, well, atheists are evil and all that stuff. Yeah, they're going to get deleted. Those comments are going to get deleted, and they keep it up, they're going to get blocked from commenting altogether. Okay, I want everybody to understand I am committed to creating, I found a new word when I was teaching, not a safe space, but a brave space where people can be brave about their deconversion. They can be brave about, their atheism, okay? This is a place where people are deconverting and people who are atheists are going to receive protection from me, okay? Because there's plenty of the world out there that's hostile to both, and I am not going to have that here. Okay, if you're a theist, you're welcome to comment and talk to us. But understand the moment you get insulting and the moment you get, just being a jerk, I'm going to remove it. In short, don't be a dick on my channel. Okay, just don't do it. All right. And so when people make this comment that I delete comments, that's just not true. That's the only reason I really delete comments. I'll leave your theist comments up there because I think they're a good example of nonsense most of the time. I don't have any real personal reason to remove most of them because usually somebody else in the comments goes after them. And by the way, those of you that have been engaging, I want that on this channel. Okay, if you want to comment, and I don't have time to engage everybody anymore. I get too many comments and I don't have enough time. I'm trying to build my discipline as a writer, and so I'm taking time for that, as well as doing YouTube, because that's the next aspect of being an atheist advocate is writing. But I also like to write for its own sake, and so I'm trying to be more disciplined as a writer. And the coming month of February is going to be me working on reading regularly and writing regularly to get the disciplined habit of it and start developing of that over the next year. And so I'm heading that direction. And so for those of you that address the comments and have discussions in the comments, I'm all for that. But I want you to understand that if somebody comes to me and says, hey, this guy just called me a name, and it's not a very nice one, I'm gonna take action. Okay, I'll go find it and I'll deal with it. Okay, I do make time for that because my issue here is to create a place where people can discuss their deconversion issues without fear. They can be brave about it. They can go forward with it. This is not about hiding away or anything, but it's about a place where you can share your stories of deconversion, and you're going to get a sympathetic and compassionate ear from me. Okay, I am all down with that. Okay, if you're deconverting, I will definitely back you. Okay, and somebody's giving you crap, simply because you're just turning away from the faith and you're going to head into hell and all this other. Theists, don't make that comment. Okay, and don't it just really gets bad for me. Let's see. Other comments. We had a long discussion about what's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic. Gnosticism, gnosis, is about knowing, and theism is about believing. Those are two different questions. What do I believe and what do I know? Okay, one has to do with epistemology and the other one has to do with faith. Okay, so for instance, a theist is somebody who has an active belief in a god or gods. Okay, and an atheist is one who doesn't. Okay, a Gnostic theist is somebody who believes absolutely that he can know that there is a God and believes in a God. But there's agnostic theists who believe that there is a God, but they don't really know if they know enough to make that a definitive case. And then the flip side is atheists, who are agnostic atheists, who, an agnostic atheist such as myself, says, I don't know if I can prove that God doesn't exist, but I'm fairly certain, based on the evidence presented, none of the gods that have been presented to me have proven their existence to me, okay? And so I don't know that in fact, there are some gods I would say that I'm a Gnostic atheist about. I think the Christian God is one. I think, all the pantheons of polytheism are there, although I would say that they avoid a lot of the arguments against the existence of God better. But, there's a lot of, but then you have the Gnostic theist that is making the claim there is no God. Now, I am a Gnostic atheist about the monotheistic gods, the Abrahamic gods. I think they're all made up, okay? And unfortunately, they're a real easy sell for a lot of reasons, but which I won't get into right now. I had a few comments about liking the longer videos. Okay, guys, I don't mind doing long videos. I'm really working on the issue of live streaming because I'd rather live stream on Saturdays and do this, and then I can answer comments in the comments live. It just makes things a little bit easier. Somebody that they appreciated the effort of making the case against God, but could I define what God is? Because then we have no idea what we're saying. The problem with that is I'm not necessarily making the case in examining those arguments. I'm examining the people's claims of there is no God and this is why I don't believe this. And so each definition of God is going to be different depending on who's making the argument and what the argument is. And so I try, I think, to bring that out in each individual argument. But, I think there's an instinctive understanding, especially in our culture, of what we're talking about when we talk about God. Reaction videos, I think, have become a big hit. Those are the biggest ones I get these days. Jenna made a comment about I Am Beggar doesn't seem to understand culture and how culture works. Because even though, she makes a good analogy of when we use sports terms in general in society, we may not play those sports or watch those sports actively, but we know what they mean. Okay, mythologies in culture tend to be that way too. Like we will reference, he's just taking up his cross. Okay, and I don't hear that expression often, but it's like, oh yeah, he's taking up the burden of this. He's carrying that burden for that, and that's a reference to a Christian idea. But that's just part of culture. It doesn't mean so. One guy said, because I was talking about, in I Am Beggar's video, I talk about Alexander the Great, and nobody is telling me to give 10% of my income to Alexander the Great or make laws based on what he wrote, so it doesn't matter so much if he existed or not to me. And that is probably the best point about this, is, religious people tend to bring in their stuff and try to change their nation based on it. And that's usually where I draw the line and say, nope, no Christian nationalism here, no Islamic nationalism here. Thank you very much. Go away. It's a lot of that discussion. One of the things that comes up continually is, the 12 apostles died for their faith. Guys, Seth McDowell has walked back that claim. Okay, and the reason he's saying that he's walking it back is because when you looked at the ancient sources for all that, you got nothing. There's only 4 apostles that we can say died or were killed or were quote unquote martyred, but none of them. And I'll make the statement again. Even James in the book of Acts, was he killed for his faith or was he killed because it pleased the Jews? Okay, was it a political move on the part of Herod? Okay, so you got to ask that question. Somebody there's a lot of other religions that don't, believe, whoever writes this, I don't believe in other religions too, but a lot of people die for lies, okay? And it's not so much that they're dying for a lie. I think a lot of people with religious belief are just sincerely mistaken, and they don't necessarily die for deception, but it's somebody else's deception, okay? I think we have Muslims that convince themselves to kill themselves for their faith, die martyrs' deaths. They're dying for a lie, okay? And I bet you most Christians would agree with that, okay? So what do you mean by they wouldn't die for a lie? A lot of people have died for lies, okay? And, you just gotta face that. Let's see. Somebody said I look like a younger version of The Undertaker. I'll take that as a compliment. I am a kind of a scary guy in person. I'm like 6'4", and my last weigh-in I was like 270 even. So, and I lift weights, and so it's not fat, it's muscle. And I've got my fat spots. I still haven't lost some of my belly stuff from when I was like 375 pounds. So, lost a lot of weight over the last 10 years. So, yeah. Let's see. I was talking about my heroes of faith. Got a couple of comments on that about my unique perspective on faith, because I do have a very unique perspective on faith. I do not consider faith to be a virtue. I think it's a vice. I think when you create a delusion in your head to believe something that you can't prove and then act on that belief, I don't think that that's necessarily a virtue. A true virtue is always beneficial to humanity, and so faith doesn't exist in that spot, in that space for me. So just a reminder of that. There's just a lot of good comments this week. When I was talking about spiritual discipline, somebody mentioned Richard Foster again. A couple people did. And for me, Richard Foster, from my perspective of the Christians that I read in the past, he's the one that I have the least problems with, because he's not sitting there saying, you're an evil person. He's like, he just kind of assumes we're sinners and in need of God. And he says, well, it's not then about, yelling at people about they need God, they need God, they need God. But it's like, no, just, find your own way to, this being closer to God, and the disciplines will help you do that. Okay, I'm going to challenge that, but okay. Let's see. Yes, somebody mentioned, because I mentioned the Dresden Files. I'm a big fan of Butcher and the Dresden series. I've read most of the books, and I got to catch up because he's written a couple books that I haven't read, but I devoured those probably many years ago. It's interesting reading the first books because it's like the early millennium, and you can tell based on the technology and stuff, and then later on it gets better as time goes by. But it's fun. And he makes mention of the fact that Odin appears. Yes, I'm very well the Norse pantheon. In fact, all pantheons are actually real in Dresden's universe, so I expect that we'll see all of them. Let's see. Once again, no atheists have no belief or intrinsic purpose for their own lives. Okay, but then having a purpose in life makes us feel bad, depressed, morose, or even suicidal. I think that the mythology of, once again, I dealt with this early on in this video. The fact is, human beings will often create their own purpose despite a belief in God or not, because of the very reasons you say. As people feel bad, they feel depressed, morose, or even suicidal if they don't feel like there's a purpose in their life. It doesn't really take much to invent a feeling of purpose, and you're right about that. In fact, I think we do it automatically. And when people don't have that, it is a real problem. Most of us can develop that on our own. So that's kind of where we're at. I did have a couple comments on the new mic, that there's still a little distortion on certain letters. I get that. But yeah, the rumbly aspects have disappeared. I do think I'm louder, okay, or at least more clearer with the microphone. So it's an improvement. My recent reconstruction video, I talked about my marriage pretty extensively, and I do agree with you, Jenna. I think Christians live in this expectations thing when it comes to their marriages, that there's this house of mirrors, as you call it, or this unrealistic expectations. I think the problem with Christian marriage is a romanticized view of marriage. And the romance in marriage can last for a couple of years, and then you have to work at it. Okay, if from my perspective, we 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 make love romantic, and it's one of the things that when it's really at times not that way. I think a lot of the definitions of love and marriage have a lot to do with a lot of different things, and we just aren't realistic about them. One of the things I'm dealing with on a personal level is I'm I've explored my sexuality since leaving the faith quite a bit, and what interests me and what turns me on, so to speak, or whatever. And I've come to a lot of conclusions about that. But one of the things that I've also noted is that even after all this time, purity culture is still having an effect on what I expect out of a relationship. And it's something that I'm definitely going to have to go over with my therapist probably in the next couple of sessions, because my expectations are this is what I'm looking for, and when I look at what I'm looking for, there's a little element of, I want a long-term relationship, then, and there's this romantic idea of perfection of what that relationship would be. And, you want a relationship like that to be as drama-free as possible. For me, it's kind of important that a person understands, working through issues and not being dramatic about them. Drama queens need not apply. But at the same time, if two or three people are gathered together, you have drama, of some sort. And so keeping that as something that isn't detrimental to the relationship is a big thing. But it's like your comment about the House of Mirrors thing got me thinking, and maybe I'll talk more about this next week, but this notion of expectations and how much of those expectations are still, mental holdovers to even now, even though I'm an atheist, of my expectations out of relationship. And I think that's something worth exploring. I think it's something that I need to look at for myself. So that was a pretty personally beneficial comment. It got me thinking. Just a very interesting week, for thinking about the moral question. But now I'm looking at it from a relationship question, and the deconstruction, reconstruction aspect of my deconversion right now is, because I want to go forward and find that relationship in my life. And I have to consider, given my possible poly nature, relationships, with a plural S. And it becomes a real question of what are my expectations in something like that? Can I have those high romantic criteria anymore? And I think sometimes it's one thing, people, well, you shouldn't settle. Well, you can not settle your way to being alone for the rest of your life, And on the other hand, relationships are all about compromise. And so the idea that you can have standards, but you can still compromise the details, okay? And I think that's perfectly legit, okay? You're not going to find, if you got this image of a perfect person that you would be your partner, I think you're looking for a unicorn, okay? So, and good luck. But if you're looking for certain, aspects to the relationship that you're looking for, I think that's a better idea, and being more realistic about it. So I don't know where that's heading me, but I think there are some residual, okay, if I can do words, residual aspects of purity culture that continue to color my expectations out of relationships. And I think maybe I'll talk more about that next week. Maybe I won't. I may have a different soapbox, but that's kind of the end of the comments and the end of the week. It was a pretty good week. Next week, I'm going to be reacting. There's a pastor. I'm with my reactions. Because I'm a former minister, I'm heading more down the line of reacting to other pastors, and I get to slam them for two things: is that good ministry advice, and two, what the hell about the Christianity part? So I get to hit them both ways. And I tend to get drawn to videos that talk about atheism because this is an atheist channel and I'm an atheist advocate. And deconversion, those reacting to videos about deconversion will probably come up pretty soon too. Tuesdays will continue to be Bible study. This week coming up, I'm going to probably do the first in the Heroes of Faith series because I want to show you what that's like. A lot of people have some interest and I want to hit it. And then I'll go back into the rotation of Tongues of Fire, When God Kills, and then Heroes of Faith. And I'm going to keep doing that on Tuesdays. I'm going to continue to go through the disciplines of the Christian or other faiths of religion in general and talk about how to deconstruct them and see if there's any value to them. And then Thursday, the running discussion on the existence of God. I've just finished my case against God's existence and wrapped that up. So I'm going to be starting asking. I decided to go a completely different direction, and I'm going to use, there's a guy who's wrote 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God. I'm going to use some of the questions he asks as titles, as springboards for my own thoughts on it, and my own wrestlings with it, and hopefully my own discussion of God will be there. And then, Friday's reconstructing. I'm going to still continue my deconversion story, which only has a couple more years left, and then I'll be done with that, and then I'll be dealing with other reconstruction issues. And of course, Saturday, you're just wrapping up the week like I'm doing now. The one thing that you'll probably know, and one of the changes I'm going to be making this coming week, is my titles are going to be very much designed to get attention, okay? And what series or something that this is a part of will be in the description instead. I'm really looking at trying to get attention for the channel because my whole goal still remains to build this channel as large as I can build it and then hold it for as long as possible. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to do as much help as possible in normalizing atheism and normalizing deconstruction, deconversion, reconstruction, because those are the things that are closest to my heart. I get tired of the fact that atheists are looked down upon because supposedly we don't have any morals, thus my soapbox earlier in this video. And I'm getting tired people who are deconstructing religion, realizing religion is a bunch of nonsense, and then they get decried for doing it. Oh, you're leaving the faith. You're going into irrationality. No, maybe they're the only sane ones. Okay, and you need to the simple desire here is to build some respect. Okay, and Christians, theists, Islamic folk, all you theists, all you people who believe in spirituality and whatever, quit looking down at us, okay? And, the reason for this channel will cease to exist, okay? And I'll still talk about deconversion issues, but, as long as people are looking down at atheists and down at people deconverting as looking at them as something lesser, this channel continues to move forward with its mission to normalize those two things. Well, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are great. As always, live your best life. You only get one go around, and then it's over. So make sure you're giving your time, your money, your energy to things that help yourself, help the people around you that you love and care for, and building a better world. But don't give them to the trappings of religion and faith because that's a dead end, and I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.